We have here an FX2, and I'm going to take you through the menu settings that I use to get cinematic looking video. Keep in mind that it's not the settings themselves that make it look cinematic, but it's how you use the camera, lens choice, lighting, and a lot of that. But you do want to get these settings right. As we go through this, the first thing you get is this My Menu setting. Now all this is touchscreen, but I'm not going to touch it because I don't want to get fingerprints all over it. I'm just going to use the wheel here to go through. I used to use this a lot before Sony came up with this new type of menu setting where you have all these quick access things here, so I don't customize any of those first menus anymore. But here we have frame rate. I typically use 24 frames per second for everything to get the normal cinematic look. You also have the option of 30 and 60 here. And if you don't see these, if you see like 25, 50, then you're in PAL. I'll show you that setting later on, but you'll need to switch that to get to the NTSC mode. Now something here we have is shutter speed, but right here, this little symbol is actually for shutter angle. So you see it says 180 degrees there, and you see it down here at the bottom, 180. As you change that, it does different angles, 120, 90, you can go up higher. And that is because with cinema cameras, you used to use shutter angle instead of shutter speed. If you were using shutter speed, you'd want to use double your frame rate. So we'd have it at 1/48 if it was shutter speed to get a normal motion blur. But at 180 shutter angle, that is going to give you the double your frame rate for whatever frame rate you use. So if I decide, hey, I want to go use 60 frames per second real quick, it's going to stay at 180 and you don't have to make any changes in the shutter speed. You'll just have to adjust the ISO or aperture because you are going to have a darker picture with 180 there because your shutter speed's going from 1/48 to 1/120 at 60 frames per second. So it will make the image darker. So then we have aperture there, ISO, and I have all of these where I can access them quickly on the camera. We'll get to later in custom settings. White balance here, I typically always use Kelvin, sometimes custom if I'm doing a planned shoot. But something to keep in mind, if you click over again, you can adjust it even more. So say if your scene's extra yellow or you're getting some weird colors from the light, you can kind of come more to the blue side, magenta, green, all that. Picture profiles, I usually shoot with them off, but when I'm shooting like our film right now, I'll go to picture profile 1 typically, and I have it set up on my other camera differently, but that's where you get S-Log, all these different options. But S-Log is gonna get you the best picture here. Overall, if you know how to do all the color grading. We're gonna turn it back off. So then we have Gamma Display Assist. You would turn that on if you're using a picture profile, because in that picture profile, it does make it more difficult. As you can see there, from off to on, it's more washed out. It can be hard to get the white balance right when it looks like that. So when you come here, you get, with the Gamma Display Assist on, you get a more natural look, and you can go through these and see how they look. Gamma Display on and off. So there, it gives it a more normal looking picture when you're filming, getting the coloring right, but when it records, it's still gonna record like that to give you more options when you get to color grading. So then we have the different file formats. I typically shoot in XAVC-S 4K. This is gonna be even more compressed. You have HD, and then SI is gonna be a lot larger files for 4K, HD, DCI 4K. Most of the time I'm shooting in this. For our film, I'm currently shooting in SI. And this is a group of pictures mode versus an intra-frame recording. I've got a video explaining how that works. It'll help you understand it better. Then here we have the different bit rates. We've got 420 8-bit, 420 8-bit at a higher bit rate than 422 10-bit at 100 megabits per second. And I've got in-depth videos as well on bit depth and color sampling to help you understand what that means and what it's doing for you. Proxy recording, you can turn on and off. Essentially what this does is if you're filming in these high 4K frame rates that have high bit rates, it can be hard to edit that on your computer. It's really taxing on the editing program. And so you can record with these proxies and it records a lower quality version of it that you can edit, and then you can apply all those edits to the master recording and have it do everything at once you finish your editing. Wind noise reduction, I like to keep off because I don't want the camera processing that type of stuff. I'll make sure my mics are set how I want. I've got audio record level here, depends on the type of microphone you're using really. And then on the next page, this fixed variable select, I just keep it fixed. For log, you can choose actual log shooting here, this Cine EI flexible ISO. I just stick with the picture profiles because that's what I'm used to, but that's another option for log type of shooting. And then we have APS-C shooting. So with this camera, it's a full frame sensor, but you have the option to go to APS-C mode, which crops in on the sensor. And you can also use APS-C lenses with this camera. So this would be a good upgrade if you're going from an APS-C camera to something like this and only have APS-C lenses, but you do want the higher quality. But right now I have it on auto, so if you throw on an APS-C lens, it'll automatically detect it and do that. But I also use this as a zooming tool. So I have it programmed to a button up here. You see right there in the bottom, that's the APS-C indication, and that's full frame APS-C mode. Then we've got recording media. I have it set to simultaneous recording, so it records to both SD cards at the same time. I also have a video on SD cards for this camera that will help you out picking what you need and make sure if you want to shoot at those highest bit rates, the type of card you're going to need, and be aware they are expensive. The format, right there, you can go and format each one. Just be aware when you do format it, it is going to delete everything on that card. File settings here, I just leave it standard. I don't really care how the files are named. Shoot mode, I shoot in manual, but there's all kinds of different auto modes, intelligent manual. I stick with manual so you can control your ISO, shutter speed, aperture, all that yourself. Steady shot is standard. If I'm hand holding, I usually put it to active. When you do that, you're gonna get a slight crop on the image. There's active, and then dynamic active really crops in a lot. Active crops in a little bit, and it really helps if you're hand holding, getting smooth looking shots. Then we've got focus mode. I'm almost always in continuous autofocus. Focus area, I'm pretty much always in wide, but there's a lot of different options you can play around with there. For video, I stick with wide. I use touch focus a lot, and we'll go over that. Recognition target, I have set to human, but you can set all kinds of different options in here, or leave it to auto, and you can check what you want as options as well, but I'm almost pretty much always in human. Subject recognition autofocus, have that turned on, so then this works. But now we're gonna go through the menus. I'm gonna shoot through some of these quicker that we already covered. File format, that's all those that we saw earlier. Movie settings, so you got frame rate and the bit rates all right there. And if you do switch to something like this, come into movie settings, it doesn't let you switch that because you're at the highest already that it can do. 240 megabits per second at that one versus 100 megabits per second with that. So you're getting 2.4 times as much data being recorded in the SI mode. Frames per second, that's what I was talking about earlier. I have it set to fixed, but you can do variable and go through, and there's all kinds of options there. Log shooting we covered. Proxy, just a little bit more in depth here. You see you can select S or HS, those are different file formats, and then here it's showing you're recording a 6 megabit version of it at 720 that you can edit with, and it makes editing go a lot quicker, a lot smoother, and then you apply all those edits to high quality 4K footage, and I'll make some videos on that, how that works in the future. APS-C shooting we covered. Lens compensation, I like to keep all these in auto. Right now I have a lens on it that isn't compatible, but if it recognizes the lens, then I'm gonna let it do all those things. And here, breathing compensation is helpful for when you're rack focusing or using touch focus. With stills lenses like we're using on most of these instead of cinema lenses, you're gonna get a little bit of movement and it looks like it's zooming in slightly and zooming out when you're racking focus. But when you do breathing compensation, it crops in slightly so that as you're focusing back and forth, you don't see any change in the picture. Format we covered. Record media settings. Here you can choose simultaneous recording, or you can record to one and when it fills up record to the other. Auto switch media you'd need for that, but this is, I just keep it on simultaneous for both of those. I've never had to do this before, but you can try recover image database if you have some kind of issue with your card. Display media info, you can see that on there. Right serial number I don't have. File settings, we covered that before. Exposure type, I'm in manual. Memory set, say you're filming somewhere and you have indoor scenes, outdoor scenes, you can go through all these different settings up top and preset how you want, like maybe inside, okay, I've got the white balance like this, I've got 24 frames per second, everything how you want. You can save it in the memory, and then say you want a slow motion version, you can do it at 60 frames per second, get everything how you need, and make that number 2. And then you can do the same thing for outdoor with these. So then when you're filming, you can go in and quickly select these, and it'll change everything on your camera so you're not sitting there scrolling through settings trying to change things really quick. Really helpful with things like weddings when you don't have a lot of time. Shoot mode, we're in manual, then memory recall. It's using slot 1 when you are looking at footage. Silent mode settings, I just have it off. Release without lens, I set to enable. Anti-flicker, I just turn it off because I don't want it changing my shutter speed or anything like that. I'm gonna do it myself. Audio record level, this is gonna depend on the type of mic you use. I use a Sony one that works really well. It goes directly into the hot shoe mount and into the camera. You don't have to charge it or anything. It's powered by the camera. The auto settings work really well on it most of the time, but these will all depend on the type of mic you're using or the type of audio setup, as well as all these settings. Steady shot, we went over that. Steady shot adjust. You can have this in manual, so like say the camera doesn't recognize the lens, you can go through and select, like I've got a 55mm lens on here right now, and then do it like that. But when it's on auto, it'll detect that and do it for you and work the steady shot based on that focal length. Framing stabilizer I have off. Zoom range, so clear image zoom, I set that only. I don't want digital zoom, but then when you're filming, you can use the toggle switch up top to zoom in like this, and there's no digital zoom that does past this, so you're not really losing any quality, and you can zoom in about 50% more than what your lens is. So my 55 lens basically turns into like a almost 90mm lens once you zoom all the way in here. Zoom lever speed, you can change these in the standby and record mode based on how you like, based on the situation if you're going to use it. Custom keys, zoom settings, and remote similar, but depending on how you're zooming. Grid line I have set to on and rule of thirds grid. So you see all these different grids here. The rule of thirds is the only one I use, and I've got videos explaining how that works and how you can use the rule of thirds to make your videos look better. Emphasize record display is set to on, so essentially when I push record, I get a red light there, a red box around here, and it helps me to know for sure that I'm recording, also a light up top, because I have many times thought I was recording and realized after the fact that I wasn't. So one more thing to help keep me from being stupid. Marker display is set to off right now, but when I have it on, I use the aspect marker of 235:1, and what that does is puts these lines here. So for example, we're filming a feature film right now and I'm shooting it in 235:1. You're still gonna record 16:9, but I can use these to frame everything within those lines so that when I get to editing and it's stretched out and the top and bottom gets cropped off, my framing was based on using this in the first place. So I have a button that allows me to turn that on and off quickly. But there are many other aspect ratios you can use in here. 4:3 if you want an old square looking type, 18:9, all kinds of different options here, but I like 235:1. There are also safety zone and guide frames you can play around with if you want other buffers to help you from getting anything out of frame that you want there. Self timer's off. I don't have any auto framing settings set to it. I don't auto create any still images. Some of these are newer settings I'm not used to and I didn't use them before, and it doesn't really help me for video. Shutter mode, so here we're talking you got shutter angle and shutter speed. If I switch to shutter speed, now you can see that says 1/48. That's double my frame rate of 24 frames per second. If we go back up to here, now we see it looking like that. And as I change it, you know, it would be 125 if I was to shoot at 60 frames per second. And so as I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 5 stops of light difference. That's why when you're in shutter angle and you switch to 60 frames per second, you're gonna have to automatically change the ISO, because when you get up to 125, now all of a sudden the image is a lot darker. So we're gonna have to bring the ISO up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. To make it look the same. That is why I like using the shutter angle instead, because then you don't have to mess with the shutter speed at all unless you actually want the motion blur to look different. It'll stay the same regardless of the frame rate you use, and I actually need to check on my FX3 to see if this is an update, because I realized I'm on an old update when I saw this on this camera and realized I'm a couple updates behind. Auto slow shutter is off because that's based on using a shutter speed to where you're in the auto mode, so that if it gets too dark, it's gonna automatically slow the shutter down to get more light in, but you don't wanna do that in video because you want to keep the motion blur the same. ISO, I usually have set at 100, or if I'm using log, whatever the base ISO is. You can set an ISO range limit, but that only really matters if you're using auto ISO. And these base ISO settings are for when you're in log shooting. Auto manual set, I don't use those there. ND filter, I haven't seen this before, but it's a newer thing to where you can set this when you have an ND filter on, and I guess it helps with maybe fixing any vignetting issues or something like that that you may have with an ND filter. Exposure settings, I have third stops that I use. Metering mode, I'm typically always in spot. Sometimes I'll use multi-metering, but almost always in spot, and I'm metering based on people's skin or whatever the brightest part of the frame is. Phase priority and multi-metering is off because I'll typically use spot. And then spot metering point I have in the center. White balance we covered earlier. Priority set and auto white balance, I just have standard. I don't use auto white balance. Shockless, white balance is to keep it from making big white balance changes when you're shooting an auto white balance. And I have the capture frame size to large. Dynamic range optimizer is off. I don't want to do an extra processing that I have to try to undo later. Creative look is set to standard. Picture profiles we covered earlier. And there's a lot in here. You can customize these to whatever situation you're in. You can load your own. You can upload your own LUTs here as well. Manage user LUTs, import, delete, all that. Zebras I have off, but when on, I have my own custom of 94 plus or minus 5. So as you're getting towards being overexposed, you're gonna start seeing hash marks in the frame. So just for example here, see how those start to show up? And that'll keep you from overexposing things, especially like people's skin. So you're not ruining your image, but I typically have it off. Focus mode we covered, preset focus zoom, I don't have anything set there. Transition speed, this depends on your setting. I was doing some dolly zooms earlier, so I wanted the transition to be quickly to keep up with the subject, but I typically keep that in the middle, and then I also keep this one in the middle. But I had it set to locked on because I wanted it to stay locked on, but be able to move quickly while I was doing that dolly zoom. Autofocus assist is off, keep it on wide, we covered. Those are the different things you can choose as your options there for the focus area limit. I use focus area color as white, does not circulate, frame movement amount standard. We covered these earlier. Right or left eye select. I have an auto, but if I was shooting a scene, like say I wanted someone's right eye, which was closer to the camera to be what it focuses on, I could choose that and it'll do that for me. Subject recognition, we covered that earlier. Face memory, you can go in and actually load people's faces into your camera. If you want to select someone for it to focus on, if you have a group of people, you could do that and it'll give priority to that person's face over the others, and you can register faces there on and off. Focus map I have off. Focus magnifier I set to 4x and no limit to the time. Here it's at 4x. You can set it to 1 initially, but that doesn't really make sense for me because why would you do ×1 zoom? Peaking display is off, but when I have it on, I typically do high and red, but if it's an image where there's lots of red in it, you might want to choose blue, yellow, white, something like that. Then these I don't really do anything with for playback. That just depends on what you like. The only thing I change here is delete first. So when you click delete on something, you just hit delete on the button instead of delete, then it comes up and it shows cancel first, then you have to go down to delete. Lots of things you can change in here that doesn't really affect your video, it's just playback. There's also not much I do in here. Most of the time I have everything turned off. I'll turn Wi-Fi off, I'll turn Bluetooth off. Only time I use Bluetooth is if I have it hooked up to a gimbal and I wanna use the record button on the gimbal or other features. Otherwise, I just have it all set to off and typically in airplane mode. That way it's just not sending out signals, not searching for signals, anything like that. I don't want to waste battery if I don't need to use those. And here I've got set to English and NTSC PAL, that's what I was talking about before. If I hit enter now, the camera would restart and come back up with options like 25 and 50 frames per second versus the 24, 30, and 60 that I have right now. And speaking of frame rates, if I switch to HD, then you do have the option of 120, but when you're in 4K, then you only have the options up to 60 frames per second. You can save, load, delete settings on the camera. Custom dial settings, I don't do any for photos because I rarely take photos, but for the custom settings for video, this is what I use. So focus magnifier, that 4x is right here so I can punch in, make sure I'm in focus. Marker display down here, that gives me that 235 to 1 quickly, switching on and off. Steady shots, the middle button. Zebra, I left that here because it's already displayed as zebra. Then peaking, the same thing, it's already labeled as peaking, so I leave it there. Audio record level is what I put on the bottom because I have the shutter speed set to the front dial. And APS-C to full frame mode is a button up top here that I click on and off quickly. White balance, it's labeled WB. And then there's another one here for ISO, but I have that labeled for metering because I use this wheel to do the ISO. Then focus standard, I don't use that, so I just left it like that. And then movie shooting is the big record button on top, as well as a record button that's on the front. Finder monitor, it'll automatically switch up here. There's a button on the side that you can do as well. And focus hold, it just depends on if you have the lens, but I rarely use that. And then the modes I use, the front wheel up here, scroll wheel is for shutter speed. The back wheel right here is for aperture. And then I use this for the ISO, this dial that spins. And then I don't use the custom key settings for playback. I do for function menu. So again, I don't really use anything up here for the camera one. But down here, I have this set to touch function and shooting, and just to show real quick why. A lot of times I'm usually using touch focus to where you touch something, it focuses on whatever, but also touch tracking can be useful. So you touch something, it'll track it across the screen rather than locking the focus in on that one spot. So I'll switch back and forth between those quickly, and that's useful to have on the function. Here I have picture profile, and to go along with that, gamma display assist. Here's frame rate so I can switch really quickly. And then I've got my zebra level there, the zoom speed for the toggle switch up here, my peaking color, my peaking level, the audio record level, and then autofocus transition speed, the subject shift that we talked about earlier, and the focus area. I don't know what this home lower left is, so let me know if you do. Display screen, select, so monitor, you can choose what all you want on the screen, and you can choose for the monitor and the finder. Record with shutter I've set to off. Do not add with the shutter button. These are just more custom settings, different ways to access them. The shutter speed and aperture wheels rotate normally. You can have it reverse if you want. Lock operation parts is set. Touch operation is on. I have touch panel only and touch panel settings. So something to keep in mind here. There's a lot of options on here. Shooting screen, footing icon, all these swipe options. So if I turn this on, if I swipe right, all of these are gonna pop up there. But I don't want stuff popping up when I'm recording and getting in the way. So I have all of those off. You can swipe up, down, left, right, but I have everything programmed in the function menu that I want and all the custom buttons that I'm gonna use. So I leave those off, but you do want to have touch function and shooting set to what you want and shooting screen on, or else it won't let you do this. And icon, when monitor's flipped, I set to flip. Got playback and menu screen on, so you can touch menu whenever you're using those. And then touchpad settings I've set to on, absolute, and the whole screen. Screen reader I've turned off, and large screen, I guess if you want you can do that, but the screen size is good for me. Select finder monitor you can have set to auto or manual depending on how you want, so that it doesn't do that when you get close to it, because that could be annoying depending on the situation, but I'm usually not that close to it and I just leave it in auto. Monitor I have set to manual and full bright, same with the viewfinder. Color temperature 0. Finder frame rate is high, monitor flip direction is auto. Vertical display I've set on if you turn it sideways. I just have this set to duration. Gamma display assist we talked about earlier with the different options. I have this set to not displayed, auto review off, display file names on. I have where monitor does not turn off, power save start times 30 minutes. That's just your own preference of what you want. I have does not link, and then auto power off temp I've set to high. If you do standard, it may turn off quicker if it gets hot, but if you set to high, then it'll say the temperature of the device is gonna rise, just be aware of it. You don't want to mess up the camera if you're going to be doing that all the time. But if I'm shooting something like a wedding, something where I can't afford to not record something, then I'm going to have that on. All these depend on the type of audio you're using, so that's going to depend on the situation. Same with USB connections and same with HDMI connections if you're using a monitor. Then record lamp I have set to all on. You can have only the front or back. Maybe if you're in a really dark setting, you don't want those red lights reflecting on anything, you might want to turn them on or off. And you have a fan in this camera as well, in the back of this, which will help with the camera getting hot. I have it set to off in recording because I don't want it capturing the fan noises, but a lot of times I'm recording something and then stopping, recording, stopping. So whenever I turn the camera off when it's getting hot, it'll turn the fan on its own. You can have set to auto where it's going to turn on whenever you need, minimum where it's going to turn it on but at a lower level, but off and record means it will turn the fan on once you're done recording if it needs to. Anti-dust function, I don't really use those. Auto pixel mapping's on. I don't do it myself. You can see what version of the camera you have for the body and the lens there. You can see the serial number and the privacy notice. But that is all of my cinematic settings for the FX2 camera. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I know that's a lot to go over. I have videos on almost all of these different settings to help you understand what to do, why you do it, but this will help you set up initially so you can get going with getting your footage looking as good as possible. So like, subscribe, lots on the channel to help you with making your videos look good, and I'll see you soon.